And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, my beautiful co-host, Laraib, as we are here to break down week 3 of the NFL season, Laraib. If you didn't see our last episode, we broke down week 2. We talked about which 2-0 teams can still, fall out of the mix. And despite the hot start, maybe they're not as good as we think. And which 0-2 teams still have some hope moving forward. We also previewed the Thursday night football game. We're filming this Thursday morning, so that game will be happening tonight. So if you want to see our picks and predictions for that, not a shocker prediction from either of us. But if you want to see that, you can go check our last week's episode. But today we will be breaking down the full slate of the week 3 NFL season, or schedule, I should say. A lot of really good games for us to break into. I'm lying. Pretty mediocre week. Um, but it's the NFL, and weeks like these are always the craziest, most unpredictable ones. So I'm super excited to get into some of these games. Interesting point in the season, Laura. Going into week 3, you've only matched up against two teams, so there's the sample size is getting larger, but still a lot of football left to play. So this is the week historically we've looked at it where we've struggled the most with the picks. Because even though you think you have a grasp on teams, maybe they just had 2 bad weeks, missing a guy, and you mess up a few picks. But this is the week where you let some of those early season biases affect you. You don't think about what you thought of these teams before the season, and ends up biting you in the ass. So let's see if we change our strategies going forward. But what do you think about this slate in general before we hop in?
Yeah, like you mentioned, maybe not the most eye-popping games this week, but it's the NFL. Anything can happen on any given Sunday. And like you mentioned, you have these 2-0 and 0-2 teams. I'm especially looking at these 0-2 teams. If you go 0-3,
You're done.
basically the kiss of death.
Hell
Then
no.
another thing I'm looking at, teams who had two straight home games finally going on the road for the first time this season. We'll see how that shakes things up. But before we get into our predictions, we are 9 subscribers away from 100 subscribers. So if you guys have been enjoying the content,
Enjoying the
please
timestamps,
feel
baby.
free to subscribe. And yeah, of course, you've been enjoying the timestamps. We've seen a little bump in our viewers. So go ahead and just leave us a comment down below if you guys have been enjoying those. But Lewis, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the picks. The Los Angeles Rams are going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. The Eagles favored by 3.5 points in a rematch from the divisional round from last playoffs. And in this one, the whole talk of the town has been about the Eagles and the tush push and all the shenanigans that have been going on with that. But very quietly, the Rams are 2-0. We talked about in our 2-0 teams. We both really like the Rams, the way they've been playing off to a hot start, and their defense, especially how they really suffocated the last two teams have played. Maybe not the most world beaters in the Texans offense and the Titans offense, but this week in a matchup against the Eagles, I love the Rams.
Yeah, Laurent, I think there's definitely some matchups here that really do favor the Rams in this spot. Notably, whenever I look at matchups, I usually start from the inside going out, but the biggest matchup for me is whichever receiver that Quinyon Mitchell is not lined up against should have a field day. I mean, your boy, Adoree Jackson, has had a rough start to the year, to say the least. And let's just say, I mean, Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua have been playing outstanding football so far to start this season. So Eagles pass rush really hasn't been that outstanding so far. They haven't played, awesome rushing offenses. But so that will be kind of the same here, unfortunately, for my boy Kyren Williams. They're not going to face that test again. But if Stafford has time in the pocket, interesting thing for the Rams' perspective, since week 11 of last season, the Rams have lost 2 games only. Both those games coming at the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles. So they definitely provide some tough matchups, but these games are always super close, always come down to the bitter end. But the Eagles have historically triumphed in these. So I just think that if Stafford can stand strong in the pocket, he can deliver, to these stud receivers on the outside. Everyone going into this game is healthy. They have all their arsenal. Eagles, like you mentioned, it's kind of a noisy week and an ugly loss, but it's still, I mean, ugly win. You still go on the road and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Like that's a very, notable win. So the vibes and the energy should be high, but Jordan Mailata coming out and saying that he's been super disappointed with some of the tush push narrative and the conversation just around the play in general. I don't blame him. It's to the point where it's like, hey, unless y'all do something about it, why would we stop? So I think that extra attention to it, if they do call false starts, if they do call, guys lined up over the ball, illegally, that could throw off some things early in this game. So I do agree with you, Laraib. I'd like the Rams in this spot on the road. I just think the Eagles are kind of due for a little shakeup here. Just how will this passing game get going? If the Rams get off to a lead in this game and Jalen Hurts is forced to step back against this defensive line and make plays with his arm, he hasn't had the reps so far this season to really put him in that situation. So that could provide some challenges. But I like the Rams in the upset here. I'm going Rams 24, Eagles 20.
I'm gonna go a little bit lower scoring than you. I like the Rams 20-17, but yeah, I think with the change up at offensive coordinator for the Eagles, we just haven't seen that, you know, middle of the field passing attack for the Eagles really come into its form yet. Of course, Saquon's there. Of course, they're gonna be able to run the ball efficiently, but I know Jalen Hurts can do it, but I think it takes some time for them to gel offensively with the new offensive coordinator. For the Rams playing outstanding football. Like you mentioned, they lost two times in a row to this Eagles team, but I think Sean McVay has something up his sleeve for this game. I think the Eagles win, excuse me, the Rams win in a very tight game.
All right. So typically, whenever we do our highlighted games, these games have some type of big NFL league-wide implications, playoff implications, or just really big storylines that we want to tackle. This game, not so much. This is more of a Lewis and Laraib special right here. As every time this game happens, we gotta tackle it. It is the New Orleans Saints traveling to Seattle to face the Seahawks. Seahawks 7.5 point favorites at home, coming off a very impressive win over Pittsburgh last week, where that defensive line was just dominant. That front four, highest pressure rate in the league when only rushing four so far this season. Not against the greatest O lines, but the Saints aren't coming in with the 85 Cowboys or anything offensive line. So, or I should say 90s Cowboys. Um, but I think that this is a tough matchup for the Saints. Obviously, I'm leaning Seahawks in this matchup, but some things in particular that I want to note. Clint Kubiak, former offensive coordinator for the Saints, now kind of getting a revenge game, as you could say, against his former team. Even though it is a brand new offensive staff and decision makers in New Orleans, I think that he'll definitely have some things schemed up, and their running game really hasn't gone, as to plan, especially compared to what Clint Kubiak was able to do last year with the Saints team. Definitely, he wants to work on the run game. If there's ever a defense that you can get your run game really rolling, it's against the Saints. So even if you have Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker starting in your fantasy league, I think this could be the week where they both can be pretty productive. Although Charbonnet looking like he's on the injury list for this week, so I think this is a game where the Seahawks can finally flex their offensive muscle to kind of match what their defense has been doing all season. So I think this is a showcase game for the Seahawks, getting back at home, back in front of the 12s after a disappointing loss to the 49ers in week one. And I think the Seahawks team, if they can win this game, start the season 2-1, things will be looking pretty bright for them in the future.
Yeah, I do want to say offensive coordinators or former offensive coordinators against their former teams are 0-1 this season in
Mm,
embarrassing fashion,
huge
a la
sample.
Ben Johnson. But this is a typical spot. This is a huge game for me as a Seahawks fan for this new regime. Pete Carroll era, 4 or 5 years ago. This is a typical spot. The New York Giants are coming in. This is a 3 o'clock game that not many people are watching. The Seahawks are heavily favored and they lay a stinker. They play they play down to the competition of their opponents, and they ultimately lose this game on some stupid shit. But Mike McDonald, you came in, you tore down all the Super Bowl banners. You said, I'm putting out my own stuff. This is going to be a new regime. This is going to be a new Seahawks team. And ultimately, they did not live up to that last year. When the Packers came in and just ran all over us on Sunday Night Football. Now, this year, you have the Saints coming in on a 3 o'clock game when you're favored by 7.5 points against a Saints team who really has not been too impressive this year, not expected to win many games. What do you got for me here in this spot? Like you mentioned, defensively, they've been outstanding. Not the biggest home names in Byron Murphy or Derek Hall or Uchenna Nwosu, or maybe even Tank Lawrence, but guys who have been difference makers through the first 2 weeks of the season. Sam Darnold, we saw him incorporate the play action a lot more. That was a key thing for me against the Steelers. Now at home against the Saints, I'm really expecting another huge showing. Jackson Smith and Jigba has really emerged onto the scene as someone you can really rely on as a wide receiver one. But I don't want to sleep on this Saints team, Lewis. They've been in two very competitive games. Spencer Rattler threw 3 touchdowns last week against the 49ers. I mean, this is gonna be a scary game. I know the trash talk back and forth in the group chats are gonna be insane, but I have to agree the Seahawks in this spot, they have to win this game. I think the Seahawks win 27-21.
Yeah, you're giving the Saints the cover right there, which is interesting. For me, it's if you're Spencer Rattler in this spot, he's been playing pretty conservative to start the year off. Not a lot of, balls deep down the field, not really challenging defenses. This is an aggressive Seahawks defense with a very aggressive secondary. And you imagine that Weatherspoon's going to get the Olave matchup. So, what I want to look for is try Shaheed deep. We know Reek will bite. We know he's going to go for the comebacks and the goes. If you can get a few deep balls, really swing the momentum of this game and really test this, Seahawks pass defense that hasn't had the greatest competition. I'm not saying Rattler is that guy to, put the Seahawks offense on our defense on blast, but that is a potential weakness in this defense that the Saints have the weaponry to exploit. It's whether or not Spencer Rattler really wants to try it. So I think that is something that if there's any hope for the Saints in this game, getting out to a quick early lead and putting Sam Darnold, on his back foot, making him make decisions, really taking them out of the running game, out of their system. That's a path to victory. I don't think that's going to happen in this game. I think the Seahawks take an early lead and they just mow through the Saints defense going through the rest of the game. I have the Seahawks winning this game 31-16, Laraib. But let's go ahead and move on to our next highlighted game. We have the Denver Broncos traveling to Los Angeles to face the Chargers. Chargers are 2.5-point favorites, coming off another impressive victory on Monday Night Football against another divisional opponent. The thing I want to see here, Laraib, is this Denver Broncos defense not really living up to the hype it had entering the season. That's something that we see a lot with defenses. There's a lot more turnover, and defense sometimes is just a matter of luck. It's a matter of quarterbacks you face. Sometimes you just have a really easy schedule. Quarterbacks get hurt on your schedule, and you're able to stack up all these awesome defensive stats, so you look a lot more impressive. But then when the rubber hits the road against really good teams, good offenses, you don't really stack up. So, Laura, what are you expecting out of the Broncos defense in this matchup against this Chargers offense?
You really want to see what sort of pressure they can get on the quarterback, right? Last week against Daniel Jones, Nick Bonito, Derek Wolfe, all those guys are really a no factor or non-factor, excuse me, against the Colts. And Daniel Jones had all the time in the world to throw the ball. They had a lot of huge runs too out of Jonathan Taylor. So it's going to be about shoring up the rushing defense and being able to get some pressure on Justin Herbert because we saw this Chargers offense, put up only 3 points in the second half against the Raiders. They rushing attack really got stifled. So if you can force this Chargers team to kind of throw the ball a little bit more, especially with Ladd McConkey showing up on the injury report and a team that struggled to run the ball early in the season, I think that's going to be the recipe for success. But for this Broncos team, Lewis, we saw them last year. They didn't beat any playoff teams in the regular season. Any team above 500, they lost to. Now you have to play the Chargers again. I think this is a huge spot for the Chargers. If they can go up 3-0 in their division, they would knock the Broncos down to 1-2. The Chiefs, we'll talk about them later, but facing up with the Giants, they could be 1-2. And then the Raiders going up to Commanders, they could easily also be 1-2. So in a huge spot like this, I really like the Chargers to step up. I talked about the Seahawks, the change in regime, who are we going to be? What's going to be our identity? It's the same thing for the Chargers. They've had so many skeletons in the closet, games that they've just kind of just blown from years past. But can be a step in the right direction for them if they can go up 3-0 in their division.
Yeah, I want to flip it on over to the other side of the ball. Bo Nix had a impressive first half against the Colts, but then just a really ugly interception And then, a missed kick in that second half kind of let the door wide open for the Colts to come back in that one. And the inability to run the ball, honestly, for both these teams, but for the Broncos, that's a huge thing that Sean Payton's always really hung his hat on is establishing that running back or just establishing that receiving back who can make plays, get you those chunk yards out of the receiving game as well, and give some easy completions to a young quarterback, even though Bo Nix is like 30, just to get their confidence rolling early in a game. And this Chargers defense, who's been playing well all season, now Khalil Mack, after dealing with a scary injury, looks like he's not going to play in this game. Um, so this is an opportunity for this Broncos offense to kind of get some of their get back, right? Establish, those weapons on the outside, pass the ball around. Evan Ingram, out this game. So you're definitely going to be relying on some of the other guys, right? Adam Troutman still on the team and some other, weapons on the outside. So I think the Broncos offense needs to kind of figure a lot of things out. They need to find a consistent rhythm. For me, it's really like who finds the lead in this game first. I think that these are both really disciplined head coaches who want to instill their game plan. And so far this season, I want to trust the Chargers in this spot, but it's just so typical Chargers to just drop a boneheaded game like this. I will say, and I got to bring it up the obligatory, even though the Chargers are home, it's going to be 70% Broncos fans in that building. So a loud orange crowd. And I think that I have not seen the Chargers really effectively run the ball so far this season. I don't think that's going to start this week against the Broncos. I think it's going to be a low scoring game, but ultimately I lean the Broncos in this one to kind of get some of their momentum back going forward into the season. And this is a pick I've been mulling over for a long time, one of the hardest decisions of the week, but I got to put it out on the table, and I really do like the Broncos in this matchup. I'm going to go Broncos 18 to Chargers 13.
I'm gonna go a little bit higher scoring than you. I do believe this can be a close game, but I just have to trust the coach quarterback combo. I believe in more. Bo Nix, just not this the exponential leap we thought we would see out of him, especially with the Sean Payton talk out of training camp. But on the other side, Justin Herbert
So far.
playing fantastic football. I think the Chargers win at 27-23.
All right, well, let's move on to what we thought would be a little more exciting a matchup, but 1-1 Cowboys traveling to the Bears. Bears are 1.5 point underdogs at home after getting absolutely ran over by the Lions last week. They're looking to get some get back. Laura, just from a narrative perspective, if you're looking at both these teams and the hopes going into the season and what we really think, who do you think needs this win more?
It has to be the Chicago Bears, and that's a sneaky way I'm winning in this game. I think obviously the Caleb Williams was a huge flashing red light. What is he going to be in year two? But you also talk about Ben Johnson coming in, Ryan Poles and all the decisions he made, all the free agencies that they had. I think the Bears had a lot bigger expectations than the Cowboys, who, they traded away Micah Parsons, and we kind of felt like, okay, that really simmered down the expectations on that Cowboys team. And so I really feel like the Bears were the team who had a lot of hype coming in, and now down 0-2. I just feel like they're the hungrier team in this matchup. The Cowboys defense has been anemic, not to say the Bears have been outstanding in their own right, but I think the Bears in a huge spot at home. I like them to pull off the upset, especially when we see guys like Kyle Monangai getting the ball a lot more, 7 carries against the Lions. I really want to see DeAndre Swift phased out. I've talked about this for the past couple of seasons. DeAndre Swift is not a good running back in the National Football League. He does not know how to find the holes. That's why they originally let him go from Detroit. That's why he originally got let go from Philadelphia. And that's why he somehow found his way over onto the Bears. But you can look at all the analytics on his rushing attack. He just on plays he's expected to get more yards. He just runs into the back of his offensive lineman. I really think Colin Monangai is going to be someone to look at.
Interesting. I think the biggest angle in this game that I'm looking at is former Bears head coach Matt Eberflus facing his, or now the current Cowboys defensive coordinator facing his former team here, a guy who spent the whole season with Caleb Williams. And I think that, they don't have quite the defensive personnel that obviously we saw last week. Russell Wilson turned back the clock for a vintage performance against the Cowboys last week. You know, it's statistically Russell Wilson's best game of his career, which interesting. But looking at this matchup, it's really like kind of contradictory to the last game I picked. That was more of a vibes pick. It's which quarterback do I really trust more in this spot? It is in Chicago, but I did see JJ McCarthy go in there and beat them in that spot. But I think Dak Prescott and this offense really found a nice rhythm last week against that Giants defense and just, spreading the ball around, finding a lot of their weapons on the outside. I think Javonte Williams has been a very pleasant surprise for this offense so far with how potent he's been as that star running back in that role. So this Bears defense led by Dennis Allen has just not really had it click so far, missing a lot of guys in the secondary, and that's the strength of this Cowboys team going up against the weakness of this Bears team. And Montez Sweat has not been as effective as you really want him to be, considering the money you're paying him to be a game wrecker on that defensive side of the ball. So I lean Cowboys in this matchup. I just think that the Bears, you mentioned the expectations that now they're 0-2, they've, dropped down, but still, like, Bears fans are like, the tension is so thick in that locker room. You see Ben Johnson just immediately walking away from Dan Campbell after the game last week, and then Ryan Poles just making all these weird decisions, weird comments, and what's the pressure he's feeling. It just feels like there's a powder keg about to explode. And if the Cowboys are able to go in there and pull off the win in Chicago, I think things are going to get really ugly really fast for Ben Johnson and this team. And that's what I think is going to happen. I just think the matchups favor the Cowboys too much in this. So I'm going with the Cowboys, albeit in a close game. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I'm going Cowboys 36, Bears 30.
Yeah, I think I agree with you about that powder keg of an explosion. I just think it's going to be happening on the Cowboys. I think the Bears, I like Caleb Williams in the spot to use his legs, unlike Russell Wilson was able to do last week. That was kind of his X factor early in the game against the Vikings. Here against this spot, against the Cowboys team, who have been awful defensively. This is going to be a shootout, I agree, but I think the Bears come out on top. The young second-year quarterback leads the Bears to this first victory of the 2025 season, and the Bears win 33-30.
All right, Laraib, we're going to go immediately over to Monday Night Football. Definitely by far the best game of the weekend. We have the Detroit Lions traveling to Baltimore to face the Ravens. Ravens are favored by 4.5 in this matchup. Lions seem like they got some of their mojo back, with that just get back game against the Bears, dropping 50 points, the showboating front runners that they are, and, getting that, hey, let's have some confidence. Let's calm things down. We don't have Ben Johnson, but we've just proven to ourselves we still have the talent here that we can be a potent offense. Jared Goff can be a productive quarterback, which, you're afraid that early on in the season, these things could be shaken up. So how do you think this Lions offense can now, with a little more confidence, fare going into Baltimore for this huge matchup?
I think they're going to come in, they're going to lay a stinker, if I'm being honest. I think Kyle, even with Kyle Van Noy, the leading sacker for this Ravens defense from last year, he's going to be out with this game, dealing, I believe, with the hamstring. But it's just, we see this every single year. It's the Ravens against NFC teams, and they just don't know how to match up against this guy. Now, they did play 2 years ago in a game where the Lions scored less than 10 points. I think they have a chance to get a couple garbage time touchdowns like they usually love to do with Amon-Ra St. Brown and
No, they only do
company.
that when they're leading. So
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe they can flip the script on that. But for me, the whole emphasis on the Ravens scored 40 points in back-to-back games. Derrick Henry, and what was this? He laid an egg last week. I think he comes out huge in this one against the Lions team, who I just believe is not going to be ready for what this Ravens team is going to show them.
And the underrated thing that no one's really talking about with the Lions, I guess, coming back offensively is this defense has not looked good through 2 weeks. So we saw the Bears offense, when that game was still in the balance, right? Being able to march down the field, find their guys. And if, like you mentioned, if the Bears had a decent running back, they could have, exploited some of those wide open gaps that were created against this Lions defense. And I think now you're facing a Ravens rushing attack that was not that formidable last week against a familiar AFC opponent who knows how to deal with the Ravens, who knows how to deal with Derrick Henry. Now the Lions are just going to be hit in the mouth immediately at the beginning of this game. I agree with you. I don't love this matchup at all for the Lions. I think that Lamar and Derrick Henry are just going to be running around this Lions defense in circles. And what I need to see from Jared Goff is, hey, big time spot, Monday Night Football against another MVP level quarterback in Lamar. Can you show up? Can you show up early? Can you put pressure on this team? Can you allow the running game to be effective? Because, the Ravens have been pretty decent against the run so far. It's really just been the passing attack, right? So putting Jared Goff in these third and longs, these second and longs, if they get into these situations, could really affect him. The pass rush, he's not able to get out of the pocket. So I think the Ravens just, 19-2 Lamar is against NFC opponents in his career. I think he continues that in this week. Give me the Ravens this one, 36-20.
And I'm going to go with the Ravens 41-28 for
Damn.
Amon-Ra St. Brown touchdowns.
Okay.
Really sealed the deal for the Lions offense.
They're going to be trailing, right? So Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to have 15 yards and 3 catches. So tough. Anywho, that's going to wrap up all of our highlighted games for the week. So now we're going to go rapid fire on the rest of this packed NFL slate. Starting with the noon window, Laura, we have the Green Bay Packers coming off an impressive Thursday Night Football win against the Commanders, traveling to Cleveland. Green Bay, 7.5-point favorite in this game. Honestly, feels like it should be more. I'm leaning Packers in this game. I just think this defensive front is going to cause absolute hell for Joe Flacco, as it's already caused for 2 competent quarterbacks. So now an incompetent quarterback is going to get completely rattled. And if not, we might see some Dylan Gabriel, maybe even some Shador Sanders in this ball game. I'm going Packers 38 to Browns 13.
Hey, give Bazooka Joe some respect. He has
Nope.
been slanging the rock to no names all season long. I think the Packers win at 31-13.
Hey, respect Harold Fannin Jr., okay? Next game up, we have the Indiana Jones-led Indianapolis Colts traveling to Tennessee to face the Titans. Colts are 4.5-point favorites, and this game has yuck it up spoiler written all over it. I'm not leaning that way, but I think this will be a comeback to earth game against a divisional opponent for the Colts. If they can win a low scoring, muck it up game, I'll honestly respect them more in this one. Obviously, you don't want to lose in this spot, but I think the Colts win a 16-10 game, and Cam Ward still has a lot of stuff to figure out as an offensive, quarterback.
Yeah, Cam Ward on pace to be sacked 93 and a half times. That would set the new record by, I think, over 15 sacks. I mean, Brian Callahan brought in his dad, Bo Callahan, to fix up the offensive line, and they have not done that whatsoever. I think Brian Callahan, a sneaky, sneaky candidate to be the first head coach fired. But yeah, I think the Colts, this is just a spot against a really bad Titans team who defensively have not been bad. But I just think they're going to be put in too many tough situations. Jonathan Taylor has been running over defensives this season. I think the Colts win 24-13.
All right, now we move on to the battle of the injured starting quarterbacks. We have the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to Minnesota to face the Vikings. Vikings favored by 2.5 in this one. And my guy finally gets another shot. Carson Wentz with an embarrassment of riches. Clearly, I don't think JJ McCarthy's hurt. I think this offensive coaching staff is just saying, hey, we want to see what a real quarterback can do with our offense for a game. Just to give him a spin. JJ McCarthy, you'll come back. Wentz might have a stink. We might set him up to fail. But Wentz in this spot against this sorry Bengals defense, oh, I'm licking my chops. I'm going Vikings 48 to Bengals 30.
And I'm leaning the other way. I like the Bengals in the upset against the Vikings, and it all because of your man Carson Wentz. Luce, I want to ask you this little bit of a macroscopic question.
Sure.
If Carson Wentz goes into this game and lays 40 points against the Bengals, like you mentioned, what are the Vikings going to do with JJ McCarthy once he gets healthy?
Hey, good question, Laura.
I
Thank
just
God I don't get paid millions to make that decision.
I
Now,
just
if I
think
did, come on, come on.
no. There's a reason Carson Wentz has not been a starting quarterback for a very long time. Jake Browning has done this before. He has beaten this Vikings team before because they cut him, and he will remember that forever and ever. Now he's traveling to the Lions Den to play them. He has, talking about an embarrassment of riches. He has Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown, and Noah Fant to throw the ball to. It's going to be a low scoring game. But I just trust Browning more than I do Wentz. Even though I am starting the Vikings defense in fantasy
Hmm.
football. But I'm gonna go ahead and roll with the Bengals 23-20.
Well, that's the thing too. This Vikings defense with Brian Flores is gonna cause a lot of problems for this, Jake Browning experiment,
Not more
which
problems than Carson Wentz is gonna cause this Vikings offense. You thought JJ McCarthy was bad? Wait till you see this game on Sunday, folks.
I can't wait. Oh, I can't wait. My prediction, 300 yards. That's lock that in. I'm checking FanDuel right after this game. But let's go on to the next one, Laura. A classic AFC battle between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Patriots in New England. Patriots are favored, or excuse me, Pittsburgh is favored by 1.5 points on the road. Really tough game for me to kind of wrap my arms around with how awful Aaron Rodgers looked last week and how, redemption, a lot of redemption for Drake May. He looked a lot more impressive last week, albeit against Miami Dolphins. The thing for me in this game is we've seen how porous this Steelers run defense is. Is Mike Tomlin gonna be able to get that fixed, right? He defensive coach, a big motivator. This is something that he's never really had a big issue with. He's always had stout run defenses. And, are the Patriots gonna make them, really pay for that so far? I think they will in this game. I like New England 23-20.
Yeah, I have to unfortunately agree. I just think the Steelers are resting on their laurels a little bit too much of their vaunted defense. TJ Watt has been a zero factor this season so far. Jalen Ramsey gave up the most receiving yards last week. Even in week one, he had that big hit on Garrett Wilson to seal the deal in the game, but Garrett Wilson was eating him alive. And then for the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson looks like he's going to be the feature back. The Steelers have been ran over in 2 weeks. I really expect this Patriots team to do a lot of rushing through the running backs. And Drake May, who had a rushing touchdown last week, I think they can exploit and touch this Steelers defense all over. And Rodgers, I mean, he got his revenge in week one, and I mentioned it. He's done. He's booked it. He beat the Jets. He's happy about that, and he's done. It's all over with him. So I think the Patriots win 27-20.
All right, well, let's move on to our next game. We have the New York Jets traveling to Tampa to face the Buccaneers. Buccaneers coming off a short week, still 6.5 point favorites here at home. Now, you mentioned the Seahawks kind of having these weird, like, what the hell just happened type games. This is not, too far from the course for the Bucks. Now, I am going with the Buccaneers in this matchup. I think Todd Bowles getting a chance to take some revenge on his former team. Justin Fields in concussion protocol. His status is still up in the air. No, he's
He's
out.
out.
He is
He's
out. So
out.
we are looking at Tyrod Taylor in this game. And I mean, Buccaneers playing too tough, come from the edge of defeat in both victories in their first two matchups. I think it's a good game for them kind of play their game, really lean on the running backs, let Baker, toss it all over the yard. And the Jets, yeah, we'll see. Todd Bowles is definitely going to queue up some things for this defense. So I'm going with the Buccaneers in this game. But it wouldn't shock me. I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me if this is an upset. I am going Buccaneers 26 to Jets 10.
Oh yeah, I'm also going with the Buccaneers at 31-13. I just think this Jets defense is just another team that's been ran all over. Jalen Warren in week one and last week James Cook, and Josh Allen just running all over this Jets front seven. And then we saw Bucky Irving and Rashad White what they did against the Texans. I think they have an even better performance here against a porous Jets team.
All right, moving on. We have an NFC South battle with the Falcons traveling to Carolina to face the 0-2 Panthers. Atlanta favored by 5.5 points on the road. Very impressive showing for Atlanta last week, going in and beating Minnesota. now traveling to the Panthers, who have just been anemic offensively so far this season. And I liked what I saw from this Falcons defense. It seems like Raheem Morris is finally starting to get some of his guys building up his defensive culture. And if Penix can just, if they can keep running the ball this successfully, I think this is a recipe for success for the Falcons. So I like the Falcons in this one, 24-20.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by Michael Penix. Just the poise he's shown. Uh, in week one, they lose in heartbreaking fashion to the Buccaneers, but last week, in a game that they easily could have thrown away from one or two mistakes from Michael Penix, he stood poiseful in the pocket, rely on the run game with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, and just beat this crappy Panthers team down. I'm gonna say the Falcons win 30-20.
All right, let's go to our next game. AFC South battle. The 0-2 surprising Texans traveling to Jacksonville to face the Jaguars. Jags favored by 1.5 points at home. And to fall to 0-3 when you were the favorites to win this division would be super crippling for this Texans team, Laura. Which way are you leaning in this game?
I gotta go for that reason with the Texans. 0-3, staring down the barrel of defeat, I think is going to be too much for this team to handle. Christian Kirk comes back this week. I really hope that alleviates some of the pressure on Nico Collins and this offense for the Texans. Please, Nico Collins, do something for me this week. I think the Jaguars, I think they're going to be fine, but from the animosity that happened last week between Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence and BTJ and his, yips that he has with the drops. I just think the Texans are in a big spot here. Now, on the other side, the Jaguars, they could just run all over this team with Travis Etienne and kind of put this game to bed early. But I think they lost in heartbreaking fashion last week. I think the Texans are in a good spot here to win this game 27-24.
Texans also two really tough matchups right out of the gate, to fall to 0-2. Rob, I'm ready to declare that the loser of this game is done. I think that, just the way this season's going, the way the Colts are playing, even though I don't have a ton of faith in the Colts, or at least I don't have a lot of faith in Daniel Jones, I just think that this is such a pivotal game. And I don't think two teams are coming out of this division. I am leaning Jacksonville. Jacksonville leading the entire NFL in rushing. And although I do think this Texans defense is extremely talented, I think that, they've like Liam Cohen has found a recipe for success. It was just the weird game management stuff at the end of that Bengals game. Joe Burrow leaving Browning coming in, a lot more decisiveness. And then you have the Texans, short week, traveling to Jacksonville, a place they historically have not performed that well. And, it's looking like a 84 degrees with a high chance of rain, actually. And in a game like that, I'm just going to favor the team that runs the ball a lot more effectively. So give me the Jaguars in a sloppy 13-10, yuck it up type of win here. But now moving on to the 3 o'clock window. One game that we did not talk about is the Cardinals traveling to San Francisco. Two 2-0 teams facing off as the Niners are favored by 2.5 points. First home game this season, you mentioned, Laraib, for the 49ers, so maybe they get some of their juice back. What are you leaning in this game?
I'm leaning with the healthier team in the Arizona Cardinals. I think Kyler Murray, he always plays well in San Francisco for some reason. And the big thing for me is I just can't trust Mac Jones 2 games in a row. They Their defense, even though they've given up the sixth least amount of yards in the NFL, we saw Spencer Rattler have his way with that defense, throwing 3 touchdowns. I think the Cardinals, they're going to continue to dominate with Trey McBride and Trey Benson, the two Treys. I'm expecting them to have a big game. I think the Cardinals win a tight one, 27-24.
Yeah, I think whoever wins this game, there's going to be a lot of smoke. Hey, 3-0 to start. We're looking great, and I'm not going to buy it. I do disagree with you, though. I think the Niners finally get a chance to get back home. You mentioned they're not getting any healthier, but um, is optimism Purdy might come back? I really doubt he will play in this game, but I think Mac Jones, once he settled in against the Saints last week, found some rhythm against this defense, and Kyler Murray has just not been trustworthy whatsoever. I think that if this is a situation where either team is trailing late, this heavy backdoor cover, heavy upset potential for whoever's leading this game. But ultimately, I'm going to trust Kyle Shanahan. I'm going to trust this rushing attack of the Niners to get it done here at home. And I just think the better team still is the Niners. Kyler Murray has to prove it to me. So it is early in the season, so I'm scared picking against Kyler. Um, but as of now, they have not looked impressive whatsoever. Now playing a legitimate team in the Niners, I think they get a lot more trouble. I'm going 26-20. Niners pull it off. And then finally, Laraib, we have Sunday night football. The Kansas City Chiefs traveling to New York to face the Giants. Both teams sitting at a goose egg. One of these teams will get their first win of the season, and I'm going with the Chiefs here, Laraib. There's just no way Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes fall to 0-3, especially facing this woeful Giants team. This defense that we had a lot more expectations of has just been a sieve to start the year, and I'm just don't really feel comfortable at all. There paths for the Giants to win? Yes. I don't think this offense is going to get anything going against this Chiefs Spagnola defense. I think they're going to blitz a lot. Russ going to be under a lot of pressure. Does not have the same wheels he once had, as you mentioned earlier. And I think he gets into a lot of trouble. I can see a lot of mistakes in this game for this Giants offense. And I think finally, Chiefs get their get back, they get their mojo back, and they get their first win of the season, 28-13.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine this Chiefs team going down 0-3. And I mean, that's the only reason I'm picking them in this game. Both these teams, or if the Chiefs weren't 0-2, I would really like the Giants in this spot to be a huge underdog. I still like them to cover in this one for some odd reason. I think Russell Wilson has little juice left in the tank, especially with Malik Neighbors, who is just outstanding at playing receiver in the National Football League. But I think the Chiefs find a way to win this game 27-24.
And I do have to admit, even the greats can make mistakes every once in a while. I did skip a game. We do have the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Washington to face the Commanders. I got a little excited when I saw Michael Penix against Bryce Young. Excuse me for skipping over. Commanders favored by 3.5 in this game. Surprising to me, consider Jaden Daniels dealing with a knee sprain. He did not practice today as of Thursday, so his status, although he probably will play, he won't be as effective. Raiders coming off a Monday Night Football loss. I think that you lose Austin Eckler on the offensive side for the Commanders. You really haven't seen a great Jaden game yet. But I've been impressed with this Raiders defense so far. I think they've done a pretty good job, stifling the run, really holding up in the secondary. So it's going to be a lot of pressure again on Jaden Daniels to be a superhuman in this game. And with the knee injury, I'm favoring the Raiders in this matchup, Rob. I think Geno Smith is going to have a bounce back game, getting his weapons more involved. Brock Bowers a few days to kind of get some more rest and get back in the swing of things offensively. And this could be the Genty breakout game. Commanders Dietrich Wise goes down in the game last week. I just think the rest advantage obviously favors the Commanders in this game, but I'm just going to trust the team that's impressed me more so far this season. I'm going with the Raiders.
And I'm going with the Commanders. I think,
26-20.
like you mentioned, short week for the Raiders and a long rest for the Commanders. Even without Austin Eckler, I think you and I both agree rookie Ja'Cory
Hello.
Merritt can step up in a huge spot as the premier back in that backfield. And then Jay Daniels versus Geno Smith. I mean, I know which way I'm leaning. Geno just has a tendency to put up stinkers. Maybe you say he doesn't put up two in a row. I think maybe he does. I like the Commanders to win 30-24.
All right. Well, unless there's another game I missed, that's going to do it for the full week 3 NFL slate. But before we go, we have our locks, upsets, and best bets of the week, Larab. Starting off with your upsets, you had the first pick. Who did you choose?
I picked the Los Angeles Rams. I think going into Philadelphia, this is a big spot for them to be 3-0. I think they're playing the more impressive football, and I think they beat the Eagles.
I do agree with you there because I also picked the Rams, so that was a very sharp pick. My upset, I just mentioned it, is going to be the Raiders here. I just think Hobble Jaden Daniels is a tough matchup against this improving Raiders defense against led by Pete Carroll. So I think they get the win in Maryland.
And for my lock, I'm going to go ahead and pick the. I'm I'm going to go ahead and lock in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
I think at home against a Jets team with Tyrod Taylor as a starting quarterback is a recipe for success. I think the Buccaneers run all over this team and get the win.
Yeah, and my lock of the week is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. There's just no way they can fall to 0-3. That would be disastrous for their season against this Giants team that has not looked impressive whatsoever. That championship DNA will be revived this week as the Chiefs make their march to something. I don't know, something better than 0-3. And then finally, best bets of the week, Laraib. I mentioned it, Monday Night Football. I like the Ravens here. I like them a lot. 4.5 points is not enough. I like the Ravens minus 4.5. I think Lamar against NFC opponents, they don't really play a lot of guys like this. They don't see a lot of guys like this, and he just catches you by surprise and delivers bombs. They've been an awesome offense so far. I love the Ravens of the spread.
That's a good one. I really expect Lamar and Henry to just dominate that game. For my best bet, I'm going to go with the Cowboys Bears over 50.5 points. I know you're looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, that's already so many points. I just think these two teams with awful defenses, their only shot of winning the game is by putting up points. I think they go way over 50.5.
All right, Laurel, well, that's going to do it for our full week 3 picks and bets. Let us know in the comments down below if there's anything that you would change, any picks you disagree with. We will be happy to debate you and tell you why you're wrong. But besides that, Laurel, is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we get out of here
No,
today?
I think this First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.